Have you ever visited the Grand Canyon? When I was about 18 years old, our family took a trip out west and I got to see the Grand Canyon. It's unbelievable. Majestic, beautiful splendor, breathtaking, awe-inspiring. Man, if you've seen it, I'd love to know what your thoughts were. Throw it down in the comments. I'd love to know what you thought of the Grand Canyon, because it is unbelievable. You looked at it and you thought, I feel like I'm looking at a picture. I feel like it's not even real, because the Grand Canyon is absolutely that amazing. Well, maybe you've experienced that before, and it is a really, really cool thing. You know, I have only experienced that as the child in the home. I've never experienced it as a parent. I can imagine it would be a different experience as a parent experiencing the Grand Canyon, because while I'm looking out and going, wow, this is the absolute coolest thing, I'd also be watching. We have a 7 and 11-year-old, and I'd be watching, and our kids would be walking around. And imagine I were to walk and I were to see our daughter, and she would walk up to a ledge and she just had to get that cool picture. And she took a phone. Hey, Dad, can I get your phone? She takes the phone and she puts one leg on, one leg off, and she leans out and she wants to take that picture, right? And she takes that picture. I would immediately go over, not wanting to startle her, and say, honey, back away from the ledge. It's not worth it for the picture. I'm sure there's people that die every year trying to just take a cool picture at places like the Grand Canyon. I would cause her, because I would see that there was an immediate danger, and I would do everything in my power to get her safely back away from the ledge at the Grand Canyon. Can I propose to you that we are facing an immediate danger? My name is Tim, and I'm here this week with you. I've been teaching on this series of making home work. Making home work in a broken society. We want you to be able to have a godly home, a home where the Lord's pleased with your life, where children are raised to honor Him. And that happens because we know and love the Lord, and then we seek to invest that in other people. And I would want my own self, just like I would be engaged at the Grand Canyon. I want to make sure that as I'm facing, we talked in our last lesson, if you need to go back, and you can find that on our Facebook or YouTube, you can find that lesson. We talked about exposing the dangers of media and said, hey, we live in a media technology world. It's not that it's bad. You have to learn how to use it based with the Bible principles we talked about from the book of Ephesians. And so we're talking now about these practical things. The title of this lesson, Taming the Media Monster. How can we now take the media and use it and tame it and put some rules and some things in place? And it's important that we learn to be kind, to be gentle, but to do everything in our power to clearly communicate, have a strong relationship with our kids, but not be afraid of protecting them from all that's going around them. Caring enough about them to keep them from the edge, to keep them from making something that could ruin their lives. So how can we do this? In what ways do our children need help? Well, there's several ways. First of all, they need physical protection. The truth is, technology is new enough that we don't even understand all of the physical ramifications of what will happen because of technology. Remember, there can be too much of a good thing. And while we enjoy technology, we have to be careful around it. We have to acknowledge that can be addictions and there can be those things. Hey, first of all, we have to check our own use. Isn't it true? You ever looked at the app on your phone that tells you how many times you unlocked a phone a day, how many notifications you got, how much screen time you did on the different apps? That exists for Apple and for Android. I encourage you to do that. And you'll see that in your own use of technology, it's unbelievable how much you use that yourself. 2 Timothy 3:10 says, but thou hast fully known my doctrine, manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, charity, patience. Here's what Paul was doing. He was telling Timothy, hey, you've looked at me and you've seen all the things in my own testimony. Paul was not just writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy saying, do these things. He said, you've seen these in me, now you can do them as well. And I think that's the spirit that we got to live our lives. Now, kids, you've seen this in me. I'm going to model this and ask you to do this. I got to check my own use. I've got to be aware. And one of the burdens on today's stressed, overworked parents is no doubt fatigue. And it can be tough to stay involved in our child's media. We use that as the great American babysitter. Let the kids watch that iPad and do their thing. But I need to be aware. I need to be aware of what they're watching. Sometime when they're watching the back, and ask, what are you watching? What show is that? What's that about? What's their names? Know these people, know these things, know who they are. Learn them and be intentional about them and be guarding in those things. Please don't be too tired to protect your child, to parent your child. As they grow older and as age appropriate, discuss the dangers with your child. Discuss the things that can happen when they wrongly use media. Maybe there's a story in the news about someone. Discuss that with them. Share that with them. Help them understand there has to be a healthy relationship so that when they get out of your home and they're on their own, they make their own rules and they're in college and all those kinds of things, that they learn to set boundaries for themselves. Remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise responsible adults. We're trying to raise godly young people here. And so help rear them in these ways. Don't let these things hurt them physically. Set boundaries, right? Ephesians 6:1 still says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Be the parent of your home. Be the authority in your home. Set boundaries. They're not going to be able to set those boundaries themselves. They're not going to have maturity to be able to do that. No, that's your job. That's my job. Set boundaries, communicate the boundaries, enforce faithfully the boundaries, and don't allow this media monster, tame that media monster in your child's life. And so there is the physical aspect of this. But not only is there the physical aspect, we also deal with spiritual formation. Ephesians 2:2 says this, wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. See, Satan will use what we let him use if we do not control it. And his intent is to go beyond the physical dangers to circumventing the spiritual formation of my life, of my kids' life, of our children, our family. And media can seriously hurt the spiritual formation. We don't have the capacity but to follow after a certain amount of things. And as we allow the voices to crowd our minds and to crowd our thoughts, we crowd out other things. There's only a certain amount of space we have. So we've got to be careful about our own spiritual formation of our kids. We've got to be aware. It'd be shocking, you think, in your own life. What are the things you got by with your parents never knew about? Probably some funny stories as an adult you told them, and they're like, what? That happened? We were right there. You're like, yep, you never knew it. There's probably some things that you held on to you never told your parents, no matter how old you are. You know your kids are just as smooth. They're just as good with getting by with stuff. This is a really tough statistic. That, in the book, Tech Savvy Parenting, author Brian Hausman, he reported this, that, and this would be a few years old, 39% of all teens say that they have sent or posted sexually suggestive messages. Girls are particularly vulnerable to this. When asked why they sent sexually suggestive pictures or videos, 66% of the girls said it would be fun or flirty with a guy. 52% said they sent it as a sexy present to their boyfriend. And 30% said they did it in hopes of getting a date or hooking up with a guy. Quite possibly, most of those girls' parents had no idea what their teen was doing. Imagine, parent, in your life, you didn't have those opportunities. Your kid does. We need to be involved with them. We don't want to hinder their spiritual formation. If we have teenagers or even preteens, well, we ought to help them with making specific commitments regarding their purity, regarding their accountability, regarding their boundaries. Those things do not happen on accident. Be specific. Maybe there's purity contracts and helps and things you can look up to help guide your kids at the age they are, helping them understand what are the good things, what are the bad things. I remember my brother sharing with his own son when he was young, 5 or so years of age. He found a book. It was called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And at a very young age, began to teach him there's some good things we look at and there's some things that are bad. Right? It was age appropriate. As we go through, we begin to have this discussion with our daughter, preteen, 11-year-old. There's good things or bad things. Here's what purity is. Here's what that means. And understanding those things. Opening up dialogue so they can begin to understand there are ways we deal with the opposite sex. A 7-year-old son, there's some ways we treat girls and ways we don't treat girls that are age appropriate. So they can begin to ask questions for us. We want that dialogue open. When it comes to technology, it's important we realize that tools do change, absolutely. But the Bible principles of purity and of accountability, they will never be outdated. So I've got to be vigilant to guard the hearts and the minds of my kids against the dangers that I didn't face at their age, but dangers that they are facing. And I want to help them guard against those. And above all, we pray for them. We pray that God will protect them. And there's several good prayers. Prayers like Matthew 6:13, where we are to pray, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That's a great prayer to pray for our kids. Daniel 1:8, where Daniel purposed in his heart, he would not defile himself. Great prayer to pray for our kids. God, would you help my kids to purpose in their heart that they will not defile themselves? Parenting the biblical way is not an accident. It is on purpose with a purpose. So we want to make sure that we're guarding their physical relationships, opportunities, and things. With their spiritual formation, we also want to guard their family relationships. One of the greatest protectors of the hearts of kids is a close, honest relationship with family. And that we ought to set aside some guidelines. There are some things I would suggest you put into your home. Right now, we have devices. Kids have an iPad they play with, not a personal device, so to speak. But there are devices they could bring to a table. We have our own phones. We try to never use phones at our tables. I may set my phone even on the counter and things. So when we're eating a meal together, we're not using our phones. I know I can be so conscious of grabbing my phone and be texting or doing something that ultimately could wait. And I'm taking away from my kids. Or we'll tell them, if we were at a restaurant, we used to go to a Cece's Pizza. Since closed down, it was near us. And the Cece's Pizza would have cartoons on one side, on one TV. And on the other side, it would have sports or like the news. And so what we would always do, because you couldn't avoid not looking at a TV, the kids would face the sports or the news, and we as parents would face the cartoon. And what we were trying to do, we were trying to set ourselves up to face something that wasn't interesting to us. But sure enough, there'd be a time the cartoon would be playing, and I wouldn't catch myself. I'd be looking, and my daughter would catch herself. She would say, "Dad," she would joke with me saying, "Dad, you're not supposed to be watching that. Remember, we're supposed to be talking to each other." So do things that will remove distractions at meals. Now, I'd encourage you that bedtime is for sleeping. Don't allow your kids' devices in their room. We talked in our last lesson about how there is a thought, there's a perception of secrecy on the internet, and there's also darkness. And those two things, sin loves secrecy and sin loves darkness. And so don't allow devices in the room. Don't allow kids to have those things in their room. I heard of a parent who was parenting teenagers already, and they had like a basket, and it was kept actually in the parents' room, and every device before bed had to go in the basket. And what they were doing is trying to guard their kids. They weren't bringing the hammer down on them. No, they were guarding them. They were helping them protect themselves. There's simply very little accountability or supervision in the bedroom. I'd encourage you, if a kid has a TV or a computer in their room, I'd encourage you to remove that, because there's little accountability. There was secrecy in that room. Privacy. We don't want those things. We want to guard against those things. Establish digital boundaries. Consider having times that you go without. That is not the simplest thing. I get that, because even when I go without, if I forget my phone somewhere, I'm so used to that connection to a notification and grabbing that and responding, and the apps know that because they send you a notification about this. You ever noticed how every news is breaking news now? There's always breaking news, and all these things come up, and we read this and read that, and then you got your YouTube video, and you're 7 videos in somehow because you go down the wormhole of this, and you're reading comments. And break away from those things. Establish some digital boundaries so that you can have family relationships. Those things are important in helping us tame the media monster. And then lastly, we want to grow in our spiritual development. How do you know when you're mature enough to handle these things or to handle increased responsibility? Well, I'd say what Ephesians 5 is a good way. Ephesians 5 It says that we are to walk. Ephesians 5:15 says this, see then you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. I think when someone's old enough to walk circumspectly is kind of look around. It's like when you walk to your car at night and it's kind of out in the parking lot or a parking deck by itself. You walk circumspectly. You look around, you're looking, checking, you're looking, making sure nobody's there around you. Circumspectly. And so when you go walk circumspectly, you're getting towards where you can have more maturity to be able to have these things. Remember, we want to grow responsible adults, right? We don't want to keep them in the home forever. We want them to grow responsibly. Help them be wise with their time, right? We don't want to waste time. Idleness, man, such a dangerous thing. We want them to waste time. We want them to be wise with the time, seizing the moment, investing times in things that are worth time investment. We not only want them to be wise, we want them to be spirit-filled. Ephesians 5:18, be not drunk with wine, where is excess, be filled with the Spirit. Yes, it refers to not being drunk with wine, but really the thrust of that verse is to be filled with the Spirit, to be overtaken by the Spirit, allowing Him to control our will, allowing Him to control our mind, helping us to discern what is honoring to God. The first part of this lesson, I encourage you to go back and watch and catch that up on that on Facebook or on YouTube. We talked about how do we know what is good media? We said, well, Ephesians teaches us in Ephesians 5 that it's what is good and what is right and what is true. We want to make sure what is good, what is right, and what is true is what we are taking in. See, everything we've seen in these lessons can be summarized in 3 words that we went to from the passage in Ephesians. We said we need to prove what is good, right, and true. We need to reprove. We need to remove some things. And then we need to protect. Prove, reprove, protect. What is good, right, and true? Take that in. Reprove the things we shouldn't be taking at. Cast that out. And then set up protections for me personally, for my kids, for my family. Let's set up protections. Let's set up boundaries. Because Satan is constantly hurling those darts at me. Constantly throwing them darts. Constantly throwing them darts at my kids. He sends them through media, sends them through all these different avenues. And I can stand in the strength of the Lord. Prove, reprove, protect. I need that, and my children need that. We want you to make home work in the midst of a broken society. We want you to have a godly home that thrives, where children love the Lord and want to know about Him. Our church exists to help you find and follow Jesus. And that's exactly what we want you to do. Find and follow Him. Whatever that path may be, whatever the next step on your journey may be, would you find and follow Him? I pray this has been a help for you. Maybe there's a tip you have from your home that you use. Throw that in the comments so others can see that. I'd love to know what you may do in your home that's a practical way of taming this media monster. Let these Ephesians 5 principles be prevalent in your home, and have a home where God is pleased and He's in first place and in the forefront of everyone's minds. Hey, may the Lord bless you. May He keep you. May He make His face shine upon you, lift up His countenance on you, and give you